finding a new coping skill and questions to ask yourself. So, what we're going to be doing in this next chunk is really thinking about how do I figure out what a new coping skill can be for me, or maybe how do I repurpose one that I already use and haven't thought about for situations that are hard for me, right? So, it's one thing for us to go through different coping skills and give you ideas and you apply it, but sometimes you're going to be in a situation where you don't have someone to tell you possible coping skills and you need to try to figure it out on your own. So what's going to happen now is we're going to practice going through and answering a bunch of different questions for ourselves to figure out what a coping skill could be. I will use myself as an example here, so you'll hear me actually walk through a real situation for me, and we'll see how I can come up with a new coping skill. So here we go. So the first question to ask yourself when looking for a new coping skill is, what is the situation I am struggling with? Should be pretty easy, right? So in the case of a student, maybe it's I'm struggling with, I get mad during math class, or I get frustrated during math because it's really hard for me, or I get in arguments with the teacher and I don't want to be. Okay, for me personally, a situation I am struggling with, and this is real, is when I go out and am hanging out with a bunch of people that I don't know very well. Maybe I'm out with my wife and her friends, or with her coworkers, or people I haven't met. I get very uncomfortable. Okay, this is true. So for me, that situation is something that I might want to try to figure out a coping skill with. So now that I've identified the situation, I want to go a little bit deeper. So the next step is asking myself, why is the situation difficult? So again, in your own case, maybe you're going to say, okay, why do I get in arguments with my teacher? Well, I'm frustrated about this or that. Maybe it's because I don't understand what's going on in class. In my case, again, why is it difficult for me when I am out with a group of people that I don't know very well? Well, for me, it feels awkward, right? But really, beyond that, the situation is difficult because I don't personally love small talk, right? And if I don't know people very well, that's the kind of conversation we have is small talk, and that means like questions about little things. And to be honest, I don't really care until I know someone better about those little things, right? So I don't like doing small talk for the sake of small talk. So that definitely is makes the situation difficult for me if I don't know somebody very well. So now that I've identified that, I'm ready to move on to the next question. And so I kind of said it already, but so the next question is, how do I feel in that situation? So we're talking about the same situation this whole time. So for me, I feel awkward, uncomfortable. Usually I feel a little anxious when I'm in a situation around people I don't know. Because again, I don't really feel like faking it, and that makes me uncomfortable and just kind of want to leave, right? Again, for yourselves, maybe in a situation with your teachers or wherever else, you really want to focus on the feelings, right? I feel frustrated, I feel angry, I feel stressed, I feel sad, I feel tired, right? What feelings come up for you in that situation, right? So the next step is to figure out a similar situation when I don't feel that way. Okay, and again, focusing on the feelings that I mentioned in the answering the last question. So for me, right, I feel uncomfortable, anxious, right, and now I need to figure out, are there other times that are kind of similar, but I don't feel anxious? I mean, so an obvious similar situation is when I am with a group of people that I know at least a couple of them relatively well, right? I don't feel uncomfortable or anxious in those situations, right? So now I'm identifying it. I need to figure out the next step, which is coming up. But again, for you, you really want to think about, okay, what is a situation that is pretty similar? I mean, there's going to be a key difference, but it's pretty similar where I don't have the same feelings, the same reactions as I do to the situation I'm trying to find a coping skill for. So, of course, once I've figured out a similar situation when I don't have the negative feelings, I want to identify what is the difference between these two situations. So, of course, when I'm looking at the situations I mentioned, when I know people, or at least a couple people well, that is different from when I know nobody. So the key difference is that if I know some people a little bit better, right, I am more comfortable, but now I want to ask myself a little deeper, right? So in those situations where I know a couple people, why is it less uncomfortable for me? And the key is, again, I don't have to have the small talk. right, that I'm uncomfortable with, I can have more meaningful conversations, right? So that proposes a possible solution for me is to figure out questions I can ask that would help me have more meaningful conversations. Or maybe I just focus on one person to try to get to know better instead of trying to talk with everybody at once and having very shallow conversations. That might answer it. For other folks, a difference between situations might be, at school, I feel stressed out or I don't know what's going on in class, and so I get in arguments with the teacher, whereas when I'm at home with my family, I do know what's going on or I'm not as stressed about the academic content. And then that can help you, again, figure out something you can do. So the next step, right, is really thinking, so what things do I do when I feel like that? At other times that helps. So that's kind of a confusing question. So let's break this down. So what I mean by that is when I have the same kind of feelings, right? So if I'm talking about being anxious or uncomfortable at other times, but that I can help myself, what do I do? So what things do I do when I feel uncomfortable at other times that helps me? So I want to think of times when, yeah, I feel uncomfortable, but I can actually deal with it. So a lot of times the other times might be when I'm at home on my own or with other people that I'm not uncomfortable with. For instance, with you all, it might be, what are some things that I do at home that help me deal with similar feelings? So in this case, my feeling is being anxious or uncomfortable, right? So I think through, okay, well, when I'm at home and I'm anxious or uncomfortable, maybe I'll just kind of read a book and take some quiet space to myself, right? Other times when I'm anxious or uncomfortable, I'll take some deep breaths. Other times I'm uncomfortable or anxious, maybe I'll watch a funny TV show to relax, okay? So when I think about these things, now suddenly, again, that's giving me some possible coping skills. I just mentioned one, deep breathing, right? But maybe a little different, like reading a book. Okay, so I can't really read a book when I'm out with a bunch of people, but certainly maybe I can take a moment by myself, like, I don't know, go to the bathroom real quick, or take a step outside and get some fresh air to really kind of calm myself and take a private moment before I get back into it. All right, and that leads us to this last part of what can I try from now on. So for me, walking through this process, I'm going to go with the one of taking a moment to myself, right? So I'll be out with other people, maybe I'll step outside for a second, maybe I'll make a phone call, whatever, or I can pretend to be making a phone call, but just to get myself that one quiet second to calm myself down. That definitely is a coping skill of taking that moment of calm. Again, thinking through your own situations, right? You really want to think about there are already things you do to deal with your emotions because you're not always feeling those emotions. That means something helps you deal with them. So really getting down to it and identifying the emotions and the situations for yourself can really help you figure out what is a coping skill that I'm already using that I can just apply to this situation to get better. So now walk yourself through the worksheet you're given that has these questions and see if you can't help yourself identify a coping skill that you already have to help yourself going forward.